Test, test, test.
The meeting to order, and since Ms. Onks, I'm glad you walked in because I'm going to ask you to lead us in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good morning, everyone. We will start with our acknowledgements, and that will be done by Ms. Linda Leedy, who is our Chief Administrative Officer.
Good morning. The Juvenile Welfare Board believes that those who work to give children brighter futures deserve recognition. Today, we're honoring our newest Kids First awardee, an outstanding social service professional who consistently goes above and beyond to put children first. Yabre Reed, can you wave? She also goes by Bray. Bray is a teen camp supervisor, which means she's responsible for the direct supervision of children at the Campbell Park Center at St. Pete's out-of-school time program. In her role, Bray plans and implements daily activities, field trips, service projects, and learning opportunities for program youth. She welcomes all students and families to the program with open arms and is the village that everyone should have behind them. She attends meetings at school with parents to establish healthy solutions to behavioral issues, serving as that connection between school and home. Her caring attention keeps kids actively engaged and eager to attend programming every day. And her impact can be quantified. Since she joined the team, program enrollment numbers and daily attendance have doubled. Children volunteer for impact projects on the weekends, and they're joining sports leagues that they've never tried before. Bray started give back field trips on the weekends to teach children to lead with a giving heart. In the beginning, program youth were skeptical about giving up their Saturdays for community service. But now teen volunteers fill a 15-passenger van, and Bray's servant leadership is having a ripple effect. As her supervisor, Katmana Howell, wrote in her nomination, "Your Bray is a whole vibe, and her waves are starting to show." We certainly agree. Please join us in congratulating our remarkable Kids First awardee. Bray, would you like to say anything? You can stand at your seat or you can go to the podium, whatever. Just turn on the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Good morning, you guys. Thank you guys so much. I became a teen supervisor, 8 months ago. I've been working with kids since I was 18. I'm a long way from 18 now. When I started, I just thought some kids don't get the love at home that I received growing up. And if I could just give them a little of me, they'll keep coming back. And they do. Growing up, I didn't have anyone that looked over report cards, that would go to parent conferences. Until I got in 10th grade, my aunt, she was really nosy, and I tried to hide my report card. And thank God for her, I probably wouldn't have graduated because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. So I'm very nosy when it comes to my kids. I'm all in their business, let them say. I'm going to school. I'm talking to teachers. I even make home visits because sometimes a single mother, she doesn't know what to do. She needs that extra support, and I'm that extra support. I have kids that'll call me and be like, "Oh, Coach, what are we doing this weekend?" I'm like, "This weekend? It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Why are you up? Why are you up?" And they'll be like, "Well, can we just go to the center?" Yeah, why not? Let's do some video games. Let's clean up. Let's clean the teen room. Let's do something in the neighborhood. And I'm happy that I'm touching those lives because I know they'll remember me. Some of my kids, I have their kids in my program now. And that's sad because that means I'm really old, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And they remember me, and they know Mama Bray don't play. You don't want me to come to the school, and sometimes I just look. That's all I have to do. Let me see the report card, and they'll, "Well, I was doing my homework, and so what do you need help with? If I can't help you, I can find someone that will help you." And I'm just grateful that I'm in the situation that I'm able to give back to my children. They're all my children. I have 50-some children. They're all mine. I love them all dearly, and they know that, and they use it to their advantage sometimes, and that's okay. Just call me Mama Bray. Thank you, guys.
Next, we have our consent items. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we'll go to our action item, which is to select the 2024 trim hearing days by Ms. Laura Kruger-Brock.
Good morning. We are here today to select a date for the trim hearing meetings. Last month, we decided to push that off to give us a little more time to check on calendars and so forth. So as you're aware, we've got both the initial trim hearing and the final trim hearing that need to be held in September. The initial trim hearing must be held between September 3rd and September 18th. And then the second trim hearing, the final one, would be after that, period of time. So we are proposing that after consultation with the individual board members, that the first trim hearing would be September 12th at 6 p.m. And this final trim hearing would be held on Monday, September 23rd at 6:30 p.m. And we would precede that meeting with the regular board meeting at 4:30 on Monday, the 23rd. So I would love to get this passed. So the initial trim hearing, September 12th, which is a Thursday at 6 p.m. The final trim hearing, the board would be set at 4:30, and then the final trim hearing would be after that at 6:30. Monday, the 23rd. And that meets all the requirements that we must comply with.
Madam Chair, I think the reason we're setting this at that time is because we're anticipating that you're going to need me here, and I've got a 5-week trial set with Judge Andrews that month. I do not think that trial is going to go away. It's been like 8 years and pushed a bunch of times and mediated twice and arbitrated, so I think we're going to be going. If for some reason it does get pushed or canceled or resolved, I will let you all know right away, so that way you can make the meeting at 5:15 or whatever it usually is, whatever's more convenient for everybody else. But and I would assume and hope that by 6:30 on those days, I at least would be physically free to be here. So if, yeah. So I mean, I just want everybody to know, I'm not sure we're gonna play it by ear, but I'll do my best to be here.
Yeah, because of Brian's schedule, we were pushing towards 6:30, but on the first date, we needed to push it back to 6 because Judge Moore wasn't available. So with the hope that 6 o'clock, she could be here and you probably could be here. So we're just doing the best we can. We're in a situation where, as Laura said, we're gonna need at least 9 out of 10 board members to be here. And because things happen, we were trying to find dates where, at least at this stage, everybody believed they could be here. So thanks for you or your assistants giving lots of feedback 2 and 3 times before we came up with these dates.
That being said, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Please mark your calendars for the change in time. Next, we will have presentations, starting with the Workforce Stabilization Early Evaluation by Karen Boges.
Good morning, Karen Boges, Chief Program Officer, and I'm excited to be here this morning to talk about workforce stabilization and our efforts over the last few years. And I mean, I want everybody to keep in mind Bray, who is just here. When we're talking about workforce stabilization, we're talking about Brays. And I see some of our providers in the room this morning that have received workforce stabilization dollars. So if they, if you have any questions for them, they're in the room as well. So I have the clicker and I need to learn how to work that again, remember? There we go. Okay, so a little bit of background. Certainly the pandemic had impacted across the board workforce in many different sectors. And our funders were not immune to, our providers were not immune to that. And what we were seeing was closed classrooms in our early learning centers. We were seeing wait lists growing in our after-school programs. We were seeing wait times for therapeutic interventions, and we had to do something. And so in January of 2022, we had worked internally on a plan. We brought this to the board, and in April of 2022, this board approved for 22 programs to receive workforce stabilization funding. So this morning, I'm going to talk about those initial results for those 22 programs. After that, a year later, we came back and you approved another 35 programs. So we have invested in the workforce in this community, and I know that it's been maybe incremental, but we're seeing positive impact. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps. Okay, wait a minute. There we go. So what did we fund when we talk about workforce stabilization? We funded increased salaries and benefits, in some cases additional positions. We funded professional development, which included training and educational advancement, some administrative costs, and some operating costs when related to additional positions. Round one programs, there were 22 of them. We really focused on our out-of-school time programs, our early learning centers, 2 of our behavioral health programs, and 1 of our home visiting programs. And if you are a parent with a child in elementary school during that time, you knew you were on the wait list. I know principals were calling, saying, help, help, help. So we really wanted to, take a look at those programs and make them a priority so that we could get kids back in programs. So what we look at in terms of outcomes in regards to these investments is we're looking at is the lapse decreasing in the programs of their overall allocations, as well as how is staff turnover and vacancy rates in these programs. So when we're looking at lapse, 50% of those 22 programs had a reduction in lapse. 73% of them were out-of-school time programs. And out of those out-of-school time programs, they had a lapse of 6%, decrease of 6% from fiscal year 22 to 23. Our early learning centers and our behavioral health programs are still experiencing struggles in terms of some of this, and there are reasons why, and we'll get into that later on in the presentation. But hoping that with additional time, that we will see a positive movement in those areas as well. We ask our providers to complete every quarter a survey in regards to, and ask them a number of questions in regards to this workforce stabilization funding. They are reporting out over 700 positions in those 22 programs. 81% of those positions are direct care staff. Why is that important? These are our preschool teachers. These are our youth development after-school staff. These are our therapists. These are our tutors. These are the positions that have direct contact on a daily basis with our families and children. 19% are management positions, so those are center directors, supervisors, and site directors. We're going to really focus on the direct care staff because that's where we see the most movement, we were seeing the highest levels of vacancy and turnover. So 50% of the programs are reporting a decrease in turnover in direct line staff. And on average, we're seeing a 14% decrease. 41% of our programs are reporting a decrease in vacancy in direct line staff position, and on average, we're seeing a 13% decrease. Again, this is movement, maybe slow, but in a positive direction. When we look at average length of stay, and this is for all staff, what we're seeing here is 50% of staff are turning over every 3 years or less. And this is really important for providers to be thinking about when they're onboarding staff, when they're training staff, when they're coaching and supporting staff, as well as providing that continuity to children and families when maybe the staff is turning over. In a lot of these direct care positions, we're talking about part-time positions and some of our lowest paid positions. Now we get to why are staff leaving? And in this chart, you're going to see the top 5 reasons why staff are leaving. And a provider could have picked, because a staff person who is leaving could have left for higher compensation and benefits, a career change, and relocation. All 3 of those could be true. And what we're certainly seeing in Pinellas County is the cost of living is increasing and is getting incredibly challenging for some of the staff who are in some of our lowest paid positions. What are some of the successes? We get quantitative information as well as qualitative information. So what are some of the successes that we are seeing with our funding? Recruiting frontline staff is helping with consistency and attendance. We're seeing the candidate pool improvement, so career development opportunities, improved work-life balance, although I look at that, I'm like, work-life balance? Increased salaries and additional benefits being offered. I think one of the things we're seeing and hearing a theme in some of this is that if some of the positions can convert from a part-time position to a full-time position, that has become really beneficial for staff and the retention of staff. They've been able to retain staff by offering full-time positions, like I just said, and of course, training and development is leading to skill growth and career advancement. We're seeing reallocated funds for salary increases and utilized additional funding effectively, which is contributing to an overall financial stability of the organization, increased salaries and maintaining staff ratios and recruiting new employees. And vacancy percentages have decreased, waiting lists are getting shorter, classrooms are opening, so they're enrolling children in the programs, and we're seeing particular and positive impact in the elementary schools. I know there's still challenges, but we're moving in a positive direction. And the agencies also, providers reported out some continued barriers, and for some agencies, one agency, they might be seeing really positive impacts, another agency may be seeing, still struggling. So struggles with the staffing shortages and turnover, leading to, operational challenges and program effectiveness. The competitive market is still challenging to attract and retain qualified candidates, in particular when we're looking at salary and benefits. Credentialing, and this is where it becomes really important for some of our early learning centers as well as our mental behavioral health programs. When there's specific professional licensure required and specific degrees required, again, the workforce isn't necessarily out there to recruit. Organizations are facing budget constraints and relying on multiple funding sources. And so one of the challenges here for some of our providers is that we are certainly not the only funder of their program and of their salaries and benefits. And so if other funding sources are not also helping increase for this workforce stabilization, that's going to remain a challenge. Training and professional development, well, sometimes there are dollars in their budget to be able to have their staff go to professional development, but because they have to remain in ratio, one staff calls out that day, two staff call out that day. As a parent who's had children in early learning centers and after-school programs, I mean, we know, we go in and sometimes it's like, who's there that day, because they have to maintain the ratios. And finally, maintaining staff commitment and reliability remains an ongoing challenge in terms of attendance, excessive absences, and all of that impacts program delivery of services. So what are our next steps? So we are monitoring and continuing to analyze all of this information on a regular basis. This is round 1 programs. We have another 35 programs for round 2. And so we're really hoping also, and what we're hearing anecdotally, is that this is impacting other funders, having them think about this piece and how they can impact workforce stabilization. And we will be coming back in a year to talk about all of that. So I would like to open up for any questions. I want to say thank you to this board. I think that this decision to provide funding specifically for workforce stabilization has had a tremendous impact. And maybe we're seeing incremental positive movements forward, but I'm seeing the providers in this room shake their head, because it makes a difference for that frontline staff every single day.
Thank you, Karen. I just want to speak on behalf of the children, obviously, in Pinellas County Schools, how important it is for these out-of-school time efforts. And obviously, we see those challenges on a first basis, but it has definitely improved. But I think about what Bray shared in terms of what she does in her out-of-school time program, and if we had that for every child in this county, we'd be in great shape. And so as much of these challenges are, we have to figure out how to get through them because our kids need that. And when they're in these programs, they're not at home unattended, they're not on their cell phone, they're not doing things that we don't want them to do. And so keep up the work and efforts to keep these going as much as we can.
And I just want to say, I think it's a great idea because not only does it help develop the children, it allows parents to work.
Yes.
Because not every parent is off at 2:30 or whatever time school gets out. And so these are very important programs, and I think it's very important that we try to consistently fund these programs to help out our communities.
Again, I commend the staff for all the hard work that you've done and are continuing to do. I really am concerned about the lapse, though, and what we can do or how can we address that. And I know you're looking at those things. I'm assured that you'll be giving us updates long before February 2025 on what we can do and how we can address that. Because there's funds that are sitting there that were earmarked to be used to do just what the superintendent talked about. And we've got to somehow figure out either how to do that, how to get it out there better, or how to find other roads or mechanisms to make that impact. So again, thanks for all the hard work that I know the staff has done in this area, and I look forward to hearing more about it as you go forward.
Could I speak to the question about lapse? I think we've for years viewed high lapse within programs as their failure, and we've put a lot of pressure, carrot, stick, all the rest on programs and agencies to reduce their lapse. Now, obviously, when we allocate money to provide XYZ services for kids, we want those services to be provided. But I think historically we've said 10% lapse. You're always going to have some lapse. If you have a turnover of any kind, you don't fill the position the next day, so you're gonna have lapse. It's how much, and how much is the norm, and how much is manageable. And I'm continuing to hear from other funders that they're seeing lapse percentages that are far above what they've ever seen before. And we're really pondering, what is an amount that makes sense, if you will, for us to then budget based on, and yet encourage our programs to meet the targeted service levels, for instance, and the quality that we're looking for. And, this is a little bit a number out of the air, but while we've always targeted the 10% level, I really think if you look historically, and I mean just the last 4 or 5 years, and even in 23, fiscal year 23, that was, I think we can pretty much say post-COVID, we were still experiencing, close to, I think, 20% lapse. Is that right, in fiscal year 23? 18, 19% at least. So my strong sense is that something like 15% is a more reasonable target than 10%. That has lots of implications. It has implications relative to what we do with our agencies and our expectations. It also has a lot to do with how we budget. I don't think there's any doubt but that some of the issues of adding to our unrestricted fund balance was because we were budgeting, let's say, a 10% or even 15% lapse rate, but we were experiencing during some of COVID, it was well over 20%. But we're continuing to experience a higher number than we budget, and that drives then the board's decision making. So, I mean, a lot more of this will come back when we at our April Finance Committee meeting and then our May board meeting. But I just wanted to kind of telegraph that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you understand, I'm not criticizing the fact that there's a lapse. Understood. Well, totally understood with that. My real question is, JWB staff, teams, have become leaders in this area and have become leaders in new innovation and change. And, is there an opportunity to take some of that lapse and move it into other programs or other areas that would make it as equally a major impact for the community, for the children. So that's what I'm really asking for. It's not just, lapse is going to happen. We understand the issues of workforce. We understand the issues around that. But we have funds that are sitting there that were designated for programs. And if we can start to really think about, are there other ways we can use those funds that would add value, not just pass them out, but add value to the existing programs and maybe future programs as we go forward. And then maybe we have to really rethink some of the policies that we have today about how lapse is handled. Taxpayers have put money in here. They've added the funds. They're there, and we've got to show value of what's left, and that it's there to be used to really make an impact for the children in this community. So I just want you to, as you start to think about those things, are there other ways? What can we do? If it's a policy issue, bring it to us. We can talk about it and decide what the right direction is. Is there other programs that might add additional value that could leverage the impact from it? Let us know. I think we're all in the same thinking about how we can do more. But lapse is lapse, and it's funds sitting there that taxpayers have put in for us to use to really benefit the children of this community. And I think we owe it to them to really take a good hard look at how we could use it.
In a similar way, in the school district, we have Title I budgets that support students in poverty. And historically, those have been used for additional tutors, additional teachers, to lower class sizes, or to do one-on-one tutoring. Well, when you don't have enough teachers to fill your regular classroom places, right, you can't then hire someone to be outside of the classroom. And so we've experienced the same piece to say, okay, we had this person, we hired 3 people to be additional interventionists at the school, but now we're short 3 teachers. So what do? Once they're out, you're not going to hire somebody else. And so to Mike's point, we've had to change the strategy, right? So we've used the money in other ways to enrich students, to elevate what they're doing. You've seen that even with some of your out-of-school time providers in the summer. We've dedicated a lot of dollars towards more enriching field trips. So on Friday, when they're with our out-of-school time providers, we're now paying to say, let's get these students to museums. Let's get them here. What can we do to leverage it in a different way? Because hiring more people is not going to be the answer when you can't find qualified people to do so. So I think it's a really good point, Mike, and one that I would encourage us to look at as well.
Yes. So just in a general sense, how does that level of lapse compare to the average of that field? Just in my personal experience, there is a lot of turnover, in particular in after-school programs, in early childhood learning, and all of those things. And whether or not it has to do with, in after-school programs, you're hiring people who aren't going to stay very long just to begin with. There's a lot of younger people who are using those jobs as transition periods and that type of thing. So is this not even speaking to the pre and post-COVID thing, which I think has a great impact on it, but just in a general sense, as to the average of what is, an understood level of lapse or turnover in those areas and what we're seeing at this point. I don't know, if that comparison might help us address the issue a little bit better.
And Stacy, I might look to you to
Sure.
I'm hearing you, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing you ask, not just in our programs in particular, but what's turnover in after-school programs in general?
Right, so is it normal, or is it excessively more than what would be normal for that type of program?
That would take additional,
And I mean, we have seen over the last several years our lapse in these specific programs grow, since the pandemic. So if they were, let's just say, at a 10% prior to the pandemic, and now we're seeing, some of them 20%. Post-pandemic. And now what we're seeing through our workforce stabilization, and it's only one aspect of the budget, is we're seeing some incremental positive movement there. But you bring up a great point. And so, yes, that would take a little bit more work to look across the field, because it's not just out-of-school time programs. You know, we have the early learning, we have the out-of-school time, we have certainly the behavioral health as well.
Judge Moore. Oh, sorry. Just following up on that, and thank you for that comment, Ms. Nage. One of the data sources for that would be other children's services councils and their budgets. And I don't know if they have as detailed budgets as we have in terms of lapse and calling all that out. And obviously, every children's services council is different, and they have different, you know, funding mechanisms and different programs they fund. But I would be very interested if we could get some kind of comparative analysis of us versus other CSCs as it relates to lapse. And then maybe even what they're funding versus what we're funding. I'd be very interested, particularly as we put our budget together for 2024, 2025.
I think it's great. It is a great question. There's no doubt about it. But I'll go back to my old consulting days. When I met with, from a strategic perspective with many of my clients, I would coach them on being less concerned about what others are doing, because if you're the worst, if you're bad and you're the best of the bad, then what does it really matter? I think we're in a very different place. I think it's nice to have that data. I think it's nice to understand those pieces, but we've got to focus on the future and direction. We know that, you know, some of the issues we've had have been COVID related, and that's going away, or maybe not. Who knows whether it ever will? But really, I would ask that you use that as a data point, a historical view, but really focus in on the future and the future direction and what we might be able to do to enhance what we have, and how we could do that. And then that leads to what we're going to look at our budgets going forward. Again, my whole thing was don't look at don't ever spend a whole lot of time historically looking at what others do, because again, you can only be the best of the worst. And I think we're much farther past that.
Well, the next presentation you're going to hear is going to, I think, speak to maybe some of also what we're talking about, looking at our programs and asking them, understanding some of the struggles and some of the situations, for fiscal year 25, if we're going to look for increased funding for the programs we currently fund, what would that look like? What opportunities would they put forward? So you're going to hear something about that in just, I think, a minute.
All right, I was not.
That is a perfect segue
thank
into
you,
our
everyone.
program
Thank you.
funding. Thank you, Ms. Bolges. And now Ms. Brock will give us a presentation on FY25 program funding.
Thank you for teeing us up so graciously. I appreciate that. So with me, I have Stacy Gills. She is the senior manager of our program finance. And program finance, for those of you who may not be familiar, they handle all of the programs relative to budgets, budget amendments, reimbursements, monitoring visits. So her unit oversees all the activity of all the program funding, so to speak. So she's ultimately involved with us in looking at fiscal 25's budget. And we are working very hard, so you teed that up exactly for what we wanted to discuss today. So we are working very hard to evaluate all of our programs, our current programs, and we are also committed to getting additional funds out into the community where needed and where necessary. But as you pointed out earlier, we just don't want to throw it out there. We want to make sure these are good, solid programs. They have benchmarks that we agree with. They are in line with our strategic plan and so forth. So what we did is we took a look at 3 different areas, lapse, COLAs, and increase in fundings. And we'll talk about oops, you already jumped ahead. Okay, so the first area is lapse, just as we've been spending a lot of time talking about. So as we discussed a little earlier, historically, we've gauged and our target had been 10%. And then when COVID hit, obviously that kind of went out the window. So when we looked at providing budgets for our program-funded agencies in the future, historically, we used a tiered approach. And the tiered approach was, if you had lapse of 10% or less, then you would get the full COLA that we had voted on, or you all had voted on and agreed upon. If you fell between a 10% lapse and a 15% lapse, or whatever number, you got a percentage of that COLA. And then if you exceeded a lapse of another percentage, you wouldn't get any lapse, rather COLA. The thought process behind that is if you did lapse, then those funds would be available already in your allocation to be used for the subsequent year. And if you didn't spend it in year one, let's say 24, you would now have that to spend in the subsequent year, and therefore a COLA wouldn't be necessary to add on top of that. Well, what happened when the pandemic hit is we kind of stopped that thought process because we felt like it really wasn't the fault of the agencies that they couldn't spend all this money, as we've pointed out earlier. Participants couldn't go on field trips, as Mr. Hendrick pointed out that they're doing now. Hiring was an issue, turnover was an issue. And so we kind of stopped that process relative to COLAs. But what we're doing now with LAPS, and Stacy's department is doing an excellent job, and I really appreciate you adding the FTEs to her unit, the full-time equivalents, because they can take care of the work as far as processing all of the payments, and is giving her more time to do more high-level analytical reviews. So we are meeting internally, and we've put together some spreadsheets that identify some trends in lapse over the several years, and those that are exceeded certain percentages and those that are under, and we're categorizing those by types of programs, mental health versus early learning, to kind of see if we can find some trends and we can kind of see what's going on. And we're reaching out to the providers as well. Explain to me why you have a 35% lapse. Help me understand. Is it just turnover? Is it, this didn't happen? And so we're having more communications and discussions with the agencies to try to find out, and like you said, determine what the real issues are so we can strategize and make decisions going forward. So in the next area, which is COLAs, and I kind of talked a little bit about that earlier. In the past, we used this hybrid situation, and the last 2 or 3 years, we didn't use the hybrid. We did across-the-board COLAs. Our thought process was, okay, you didn't spend it for whatever reason because of COVID. We're going to give you the full COLAs because we're thinking you're going to get back up to speed and you're going to need the COLAs. And then we changed that philosophy the second year in 21, and we said, okay, let's look at allocating the COLAs. We separated their allocation amounts between salaries and benefits and between operating expenses, and we said, okay, so of this COLA, 10%, for example, would go to salary and benefits, and 3% would go to operating expenses, or whatever the breakdown was. And that's how we calculated the COLA, because our thought process, again, was we're trying to get minimum wage up to a reasonable level. Benefits are going through the roof relative to insurance and healthcare costs and so forth. And we don't want to micromanage the agencies. I mean, you put your budget together and you submit that to us based on what you think is best. Well, we've decided this year for fiscal 25 to go back to that tiered approach and do a deeper dive, as Stacy indicated, and kind of look at, if you're getting a 35% lapse, why do I need to give you a COLA unless you can explain to me why you had a 35% lapse? So we're going back and looking at that hybrid approach as opposed to just doing an across-the-board COLA. And I think that's a reasonable approach. And then the next thing we've done, I'll let Stacy talk to you about what we're doing with increased funding.
So along with going back to the tiered approach for cost of living adjustments, there is a sense that there are some programs out there that are doing a really good job. And in addition to that, there are programs that have already in fiscal year 24, in the first few months of fiscal year 24, contacted JWB in a variety of different manners. They might email a financial analyst, or they might email Karen Bogus and say, I have something that I want to do and I want to increase my allocation. So JWB decided it was time to formalize a process for our providers to utilize to actually ask for an increase in allocation, or actually they could use it for a change in allocation. If they wanted to decrease it, I mean, they could do that as well. So knowing that we're going back to the tiered approach, we wanted to be able to give all of our providers programs the opportunity to request additional funding for FY25. And so we created this process. We created the process, we sent this out to all of our providers and explained it as, hey, you know what, if you have a good reason to increase or to request an increase in your allocation, we will take a look at it. And so it's not just the program finance staff that are doing that. So if we get a request in, we'll have like a collaborative approach. There'll be teams. There'll be the financial analyst, the senior program consultant, the evaluator will review those, come up with a recommendation, go to the managers will review it, make a recommendation to the executive team. But anyway, we'll review these requests for expansions based on whether or not there is a positive impact on participants, the methodology, the targeted service levels, and the program outcomes. And we'll evaluate them not just on how they're presented, but on past performance. How did you lapse the last couple of years? Did you meet your program outcomes? Did you actually hit your target service levels? So we'll see what happens. That was sent out, I think it was on January 24th. Their deadline was February 13th. We've amassed those that have come in. There were 43 that came in. There are some that we probably won't even set up internal collaborative teams to look at because they weren't complete, but I don't have summarized information yet for you because we just got them in, but we're going to be taking a look at them, and those are our next steps. So
Yep, I was just going to add that the emphasis here was expansion on existing programs. We were not looking for brand new programs. You know, we wanted you're already doing something well and you're doing great, but you see the need and desire to expand that program, and you need additional funds to be able to accomplish that. So let's hear that, and we'll entertain it, because as Stacy mentioned earlier, we really didn't have a mechanism in place for someone to come forward and say, hey, my allocation has been this amount every year, and all I've been getting every year is a COLA. You know, can you really take a look at my program and give me a valid increase? So we thought this would be a good opportunity to get these information now before we give out the fiscal 25 allocated dollar amounts, which we normally let our providers know on May 1st what their allocation amount will be. So that's why we're hustling to get this information. As Stacy indicated, we didn't know how many applications we would get, and so when I called her yesterday, I'm like, how many did we get? And she's like, well, we got 42. I'm like, well, we didn't get 100. You know, we have 100 programs out there, so we have 42 to look at, but we'll certainly evaluate those and kind of see if there's a need to expand on the allocation side. But
I just want to add this, really in keeping with the comments, Mike, that you made, and comments Brian has made over time, to say, you know, let's responsibly get this money into the community, and to programs that are already working well. As Laura said, some of this, as we look at it, and we had 4 or 5 different categories that the programs could suggest relative to needing funds. One was other workforce stabilization, maybe positions that weren't adjusted 2 years ago or a year ago, but need to be. Another was expansion. We have a wait list of 100 kids for a program that's working well. If we had 3 more people, we could serve those kids. So some of it's there, some of it's geographic. Read at least one that most of our services are grouped in St. Petersburg, but we get referrals from North County, and the distance is just too great, and the personnel we have are not adequate to take those additional additional participants. So all of those and at least a few more, I'm sure, types of requests to support programs that are already working and working well.
Like a good example is one of the things that they can check off as a reason for asking for additional funds is a funding loss. And so at our last meeting, you all approved a recommendation to provide additional funding to those programs that lost funding from VOCA at no fault of their own, so that we're going to continue to keep that programming working as we would like, as it should. So that is another reason. It was funding loss, increased costs. In particular, we're hearing a lot about insurance, and not just like staffing for workforce stabilization, but there were some programs that could not work with us with workforce stabilization at the time we were offering it because they had other funders, maybe federal funders, and they couldn't really give only JWB sort of earmarked staff a raise. So that situation may have changed, and now they can give everybody raises, and so we would like to jump on that bandwagon because we were trying to do that, a year or two ago, and enhance services. And I think did I hit 5?
You did a good job off the top of your head.
Anyway.
But we'll certainly take a look at all that information and so forth. We will be presenting at the April Finance Committee meeting for those of you who sit on that committee. And those of you that don't, you're more than welcome to come to the Finance Committee meetings in April, and we'll have put together by then what we think the COLAs are, what we think the allocations are. So that ought to be a pretty robust meeting. And just to remind you that I will have. No, I'm not. I will remind you that I will not be here for that meeting.
So this was my task.
That's all, they got it all under control. Any comments or questions?
Thank you for that. I think that was very helpful in, kind of giving us what I teed you up for that I didn't know I was doing. Yeah, I'd like to see it go further than that. Not just existing programs, but Sleep Baby Safely and Turbo Babies would not have happened if we only looked at what existing programs were at. So I think, we're at that pivotal time, I think, in the transition of JWB's growing position and within the community to step out a little bit.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Now we'll go to the Child Opportunity Index update by Michael Havelka. Oh, I'm sorry, and Megan Seals.
That's okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Seals, the Senior Manager of Performance and Evaluation here at JWB, and I will be co-presenting today with Michael Havelka. I'm going to have to get his title right because it's a long one. Senior Data Business and Intelligence Analyst, other known as our superstar. Today we'll be reviewing the Pinellas Child Opportunity Index. We have several newer board members, so we thought it was time to bring this indicator back to the board and explain how we use it here at JWB and in the community. And it'll be a refresher for those who have been with us longer. I'm going to turn it over to Michael. He's going to start us off, and then I will share some details of how we particularly use the Child Opportunity Index here at JWB.
Good morning, everyone. So, excuse me. One of the things that I heard throughout the board meeting so far, it's a common vernacular word, it appears, is opportunity, right? We use it all the time. One of the things, though, even in using it, is how do we measure it? Especially how do we measure it, how do we define it, how do we define the lack of it when it comes to children specifically within Pinellas County. So we actually worked with, a couple years ago, Brandeis University and the Curran Institute from the Ohio State University to use one of their tools and develop it specifically for Pinellas County. So we didn't create the COI. It was originally part of the foundational work from Data Diversity Kids. They came up with it. It's actually a nationwide measure that can be used. The reason we work specifically with them was because they do it based off of national data and the major metropolitan areas. And for Pinellas County, we're lumped in with Hillsborough County. And as we're the JWB welfare, or the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County, we can only do what's within our borders here. So we worked with them to actually kind of tweak it and make it unique to us, because we also, as you all know, we collect a lot of data. And so whereas the overall COI at the national level has to rely on national data sets, we here can use our own data in culmination with the school district, in culmination with our funded agencies, and that's a huge advantage for us in this tool. So kind of how do we get involved? I gave a little bit of explanation on that, but it really came through our partnership with the NNIP, or the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership. What is that? So it's essentially a learning network coordinated by the Urban Institute, which is located in Washington, D.C., and it connects independent partner organizations in more than 30 cities. It's not necessarily just like government agencies like us. It could be, colleges, local grassroots efforts. And we all get together once a year somewhere in one of the partner cities throughout the nation. This past year it was in LA. And we discuss what's working, what's not. How are we meeting the needs of our community? Not only how are we meeting the needs of our community, but how are we getting them involved with the data that's collected? Because as you know, ample amounts of information is collected on all of us every day. When we access our phones and we think of something, and next thing you know, we go on our phone and see an advertisement for it, and we're like, whoa, my gosh, like they're in my mind, or they're reading my mind. So there's a lot of data being collected about us. And not only that, with that collection, how can we then utilize it or leverage it for the community to then use it to improve areas where they might want improvement but don't necessarily know how? So we got in specifically for the children to examine, measure, and improve the lives of children and families in Pinellas County. We know we put out a lot of funding already. We know we do have measures specifically to the outcomes to see. But beyond that, what else is there? We know that with opportunity, it's not necessarily one thing or the other. It's a culmination. We've heard it before, the old adage, it takes a village to raise children. That's true. It's not done by one single necessarily individual thing or entity. It takes a whole village to do that. And so what this measure does is it helps enable us to be able to measure that over time too, which is a big piece. So we can see past, present, and we can work and wait once the data comes out and see the future as well, to see if the decisions we're making now, whether it's funding, programmatically, if that's doing what we believe, we're able to measure that, but we're also able to see, is it changing areas of lower opportunity into higher opportunity? Are we to even, maybe is there a backslide? And if there's a backslide, do we have the ability to measure that and then find out what it is? And with this tool, we do. So in the past, just for a little brief history, at the Juvenile Welfare Board here, we used to go by the high-risk zones in Pinellas County. We had 5 of them. Those were the areas where we kind of focused a little more because there was greater need for various reasons. But what we found out is that the high-risk zones are at the zip code level, and zip codes can contain roughly 100,000 residents. But we also found out it was based solely off of adult poverty, which made logical sense because we know if adults are in poverty, more than likely their children are as well if they have them. And so what we did, and what's great about the Child Opportunity Index, is we can then take this same sort of data but break it down to the census tract level. So as you can see between the maps, the left and the right, you can see a zip code versus a census tract. At the census tract level, there's never more than 8,000 people who live there. Every 10 years when the census goes through and does the major national count again, there's the ability for the census tract, if it say grows over 8,000, it'll split into another, or if it's less than 8,000, depending on local ones around it, it may be kind of grow or shrink depending on the population. But what's nice about it is, at the zip code level, it's kind of really hard to get more granular, to really see what's going on. And when you go at the census tract level, you can see, I always point to, if you look at the high-risk zone number 1 up in the top left corner of Pinellas County, that's kind of the Tarpon Springs area. If you look between the maps, you can see that, high-risk zone 1 covers a big area, but when you break it down at the census tract level, you can see there's about 5 census tracts in there, and they're not all the same, at the opportunity level. And that's important, especially when it comes to programmatic stuff, when we're really trying to see where can we make a difference? Because, you can blanket money, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make a difference. Now we can make involved decisions based on the data that we collect and say, oh, we see a need here that maybe is not in the rest of it. And so we can focus that. So it's kind of like spending our money better, not necessarily just as blindly. So what measures are part of the PCOI, the Pinellas Child Opportunity Index? So there's 10 education variables, there's 8 health and environmental variables, and then there's 6 socioeconomic variables. The education variables consist of what you can see on the screen here. These come through the American Community Survey, which is part of the U.S. Census Bureau. That's a survey that's sent out every year to a select subset of the population. And basically what they do is through statistical analysis and statistical modeling, they kind of make it an average for an area. First, in this instance, at our level, like the zip code level. They do it at the county level, state level as well. We also, you can see in here, some of this data specifically to us that we do is like the early childhood enrollment or the proximity to early childhood care centers. So we have a mapping tool that we're able to put that down and then kind of determine where they are within a geographical area. Is it somewhere where it's a low opportunity area? Is it somewhere where it's already a high opportunity area? It's just a great tool that we can then take this data and see it visually. This here, so this is what all the education variables look like mapped. So when we originally did this, we did it in the year 2019, which for better or worse, it kind of looked at a good point as pre-pandemic. And then we determined that about roughly 3 years, we'll basically rerun the model again to get updated data. Even though there's data that comes out every year, to do a year-over-year analysis, it's kind of incremental. So we figured the 3-year mark was a sweet spot to where we can catch things if they're going bad, or we can also see if they're going good to then where we can then increase whether it's funding or programming in a specific area. And this is just based on the education variables. One thing to kind of note too is that, some areas that were green maybe now are red, or vice versa. But it's nice to be able then to kind of measure that and see over time, because we can see specifically in our area, like the realm of JWB, are the programs we're funding, are they making a difference? And we can say definitively yes, not necessarily just based on education, but maybe on the environment itself, or some of the other examples I'll give you here in a moment of how this is not, it's a JWB tool we use, but it's actually like a community asset. And it's not just a JWB asset, but community as in the county, as in every one of us in this room. This is a tool for us. These are the variables that are involved in the health and environment. These come from all different sources, mainly like the CDC or, again, the ACS or the EPA related to the toxic substances and proximity to Superfund sites. Good news for us is there's nothing immediately in Pinellas County Superfund related, so that's good. But then also variables like walkability and housing vacancy. So we know that being able to walk to a park can help people's mental health. Not just necessarily adults, but children as well. People see the area, they go, they're not just necessarily in their house and their computer, they're going out and sitting at the park, they're walking the dog. Those are important variables related to child opportunity. This here's an example of that map, 2019 versus 2023, and you can see the changes throughout the county that are occurring, some within our control, some just not within our control, excuse me. And then this here is a socioeconomic status. These are the variables involved with that. These all come from the census. A lot of these variables we've used before. And so being able to work them into this tool is a really powerful ability. This is the example of the map of the socioeconomic over time. This here, so this is all the factors, and what's great about this tool is we can do it at the single factor level. So the maps, most of them you've seen and what you have in the booklets we have where they're combined, whether it's overall with everything combined or education in each of those domains. We also break it down to single factor, which I think is the real power of where this tool comes in handy, is we can look at a single variable, we can map it, and we can see what that opportunity is in that census tract for that variable. And it's not just, our mapping abilities aren't just limited to these variables, right? So pretty much anything that we can geocode, which we pretty much do, and we work with our partners at the county and stuff, we're able to map that. So we can then start overlaying all these different variables, not just the COI ones, but we can overlay a bunch of other ones to see how they interact. Is there an interaction? Is there somewhere where we kind of need to be looking? An example too is we could do like population maps. We've done that before where we'll take children under 18 and where do they live? Like where's the density of it? And then do we have programming in that area? Would it make sense to put programming in that area? We'll look and see with that density, is it, hey, an area is showing up as really red, but it's actually, no one lives there because it's industrial. Those are the types of things we're able to do with that. And it's not just the data. Another key part of this is the ground truthing is what we call it. So that's people who are in the community, not just us, not just our employees here, but community members who know their communities to where, we see, hey, this is kind of showing up on the map. The data is telling us this, but what is the lived experience? Because we know lived experience is just as important as a number. And so we can then add all that together, go in and learn more about it. This here is just all variables combined, and you can see from 2019 to 2023, the changes that have occurred. I will say, I think overall they're ticking in the right direction, which is pretty good considering pre and post pandemic. And in that time, we know there's a lot of hardships across the map in every aspect. So I would say overall, I think it's a good story of resiliency and being able to bounce back. I'm going to turn it over to Megan now.
Thank you, Michael, for that explanation. As the senior manager of the evaluation unit, I want to emphasize that the Child Opportunity Index is not just an asset for JWB, but it's an asset for the whole community. And we use it in a variety of ways. I'm going to take some time to give some examples and of how we utilize it, but this isn't a comprehensive list, but we might be here all day if I did that. So first, identification of the community need. As Michael explained, we can use this to better target our funding. So for example, if we were to put out a request for proposals, let's say for literacy, we could narrow down Pinellas County to that low reading proficiency indicator and show where our children are struggling the most on reading proficiency. And then we could target literacy services in those areas. And as we put out that RFP, we could, if warranted, score based on their reach in those lower opportunity areas. In addition, not all of our funding comes through competitive funding. So we can target programming utilizing the COI, such as how we targeted our newest quality early learning site in Tarpon Springs, an area that we knew was limited in quality early learning centers. Michael demonstrated the changes over time by comparing the two maps. And what that shows us is that we can track emerging needs. So if we see an area, I think if you can think back to, specifically High Point, it changed from yellowish to moving towards the orange, the red. We know in those 3-year periods of time, we need to be paying attention to that, specifically when we drill down to single factors. Other funding. This is a great asset for our community as a whole, because we're able to share this with our programs and providers to help them and assist them in creating their grant applications for additional funding from other sources. What that does is it strengthens their application when they're applying, and it diversifies their portfolio, which greater impacts the whole community when we're in this together and not just JWB funding. When we analyze programs in our evaluation unit, we stratify outcomes by population. And so you've seen this regularly when we present to the board. We may do demographics, gender, race, ethnicity, all of those items, but we also look at the Child Opportunity Index. This helps us explain who we're serving. Are we reaching a high opportunity area, or are we serving the very low and moderate areas? And furthermore, we can take the time to say, okay, who's performing the best? If we're evaluating an early learning center on their school readiness rates, we can drill down to the level to say, those in the low opportunity area are making the most gains, those in the moderate area, or perhaps that the high opportunity were doing well when they came in, and we can sustain that performance. It gives us a greater understanding of how our programs are impacting different populations in our community. Another example is guiding program outreach. When program and implementation happens specifically, recruitment can sometimes be a challenge. We have to get the word out to the community that services are available when new programming comes up. So what we can do to assist programs in that recruitment of participants is we can pinpoint specific geographic areas where they might want to target outreach. So maybe there's a rec center they could go to, or a neighborhood family center, or the local soccer field to share what services are available and recruit their participants. The geographic map helps us know, okay, these are where these families live, and we need to get out there and let them know about the funding and programs we have to help them support them. In addition, Michael has talked about this throughout his presentation, but this is a community approach. So this isn't just for JWB. We work with our partners throughout the county, and I'm sorry if I exclude partners, it's not intentional, but just a few examples is sharing this information with the Pinellas County school system, sharing our maps with them, the community councils in our area. We share these presentations with them as well. Pinellas County to work on things that are outside of JWB's funding scope or the Department of Child Welfare. So with doing that, we have a all hands on deck approach to helping this community. And we know a rising tide rises all boats. Lastly, interactive maps. This is probably the most important piece. It's very easy to digest. Not everyone loves data like Michael and I. And so if we can give them an interactive map that is fun to look at, easy to comprehend, we're getting information out there in a more efficient way using digestible data visualizations. And that is a huge strength because we can talk all day about the numbers, but if people can see it, they can absorb it much better. So I'm going to open it up to questions for Michael and I now.
Any questions from the board? Ms. McCurry?
Really don't have any question. It's amazing the amount of work that you guys have done. And Michael, I can't imagine if you get a chance to use AI in your future, what data we can get. I remember in the beginning when you first started, and the type of data that you had and what you were able to accomplish, but to see where you've come with it and granularly building down and also to be able, most importantly, to see some of the changes that have been made because of the impact and identification of the issues that we were dealing with. I'm so happy technology has kept up speed and pace with him, because if not, you would be shutting down 90% of your database systems. But great job, both of you. Please keep focused on it, and let's keep moving forward with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Next, we'll have our Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you. First, just a quick reminder that we're continuing to accept nominations for the 2024 Dillinger McCabe Leadership Award through tomorrow. So not much more time, but through tomorrow, February 16th. And in terms of process, after that, the selection committee will convene to select this year's recipient. The selection committee consists of representatives from the Dillinger and the McCabe families, Board Chair Moore, and immediate past Board Chair Mike McCurrick, and Legacy Board Member Jim Sewell. All the nominees will be recognized at the event, I think with a ribbon or, so that people know who they are. And the top recipient of the award will be announced at the close of our annual Kids First Awards Luncheon that will be on April 26th. Nomination criteria and the online form are in the awards section on our website. And then an update and a reminder for our 2024 Children's Summit. That's going to be on March 7th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at where we usually have that event at the St. Pete College Seminole campus. We welcome you all there. It is a more limited group of people. I think the room per the fire marshal holds 200, period. So we're inviting leaders from across the county to be there, but typically, for instance, only one member from one of our agencies, not 5 or 6. So it should be a good room. The program is titled The Power of Connections. That will be the theme, and we're going to be focusing on the impact of social media and screen time and the importance of relationships, belonging, and digital wellness for kids. We have 2 co-presenters. Dr. Jennifer Katzenstein will be presenting about social media. She's a pediatric neuropsychologist, and she's the co-director of the Center for Behavioral Health, and she's the director of psychology, neuropsychology, and social work at Johns Hopkins All Children's, and she has been intimately involved with our Children's Mental Health Initiative, is really part of the JWB family in many ways. She's been exceedingly helpful to us in a variety of ways. She recently presented on this same topic to the Pinellas County Health and Human Services Leadership Board, sometimes called HHSLB. Our other co-presenter is Dr. Whitney Raglan Bignall. She often goes by Dr. Whitney, her first name, with her patients and others. She is from Columbus, Ohio, the Nationwide Children's Hospital there, where for years she played an integral role in working with families within a primary care center that served primarily low-income and racially diverse community. There, she implemented a program to help enhance parenting skills for raising young children and built partnerships with community organizations. She loved tabling, meaning, being out in the community, community events with her table of resources for families. She is now Associate Clinical Director of a movement called On Our Sleeves that is supported by and housed by Nationwide Children's Hospital. And it is a movement for children's mental health. She has a real passion for kids, and she will co-present with Dr. Katzenstein about the power of belonging, as well as the impact of social media on our kids. Wanted to make sure you knew, I think this is at your seats, about three Grand Families events. We will have one in North County, Mid County, and South County. There are different dates, one in March, one in April, one in May. These are events meant for grandparents who are raising kids, uncles, aunts, others who are taking on the care of children in their home and may face different issues and challenges than would the parents. So at all three of these, there will be lots of resources there for grand families. Often that's the first thing. They're just not connected, and their peers are not necessarily connected with the services that they need because their peers may be other grandparents who don't have kids in their home. So updating them, the last time they did this might have been 20 or 30 years ago, knowing what's available to them now uniquely as grandparents or others, but also all of the resources that other parents might have access to. So there will be activities for both the adults and kids. These are all on Saturdays, so we hope they'll be available to all grand families. We look forward to that. Obviously, drop by if you'd like to. We talked earlier about some of our funding approaches. Wanted to also mention a shift that's been in the making for quite a while relative to how we monitor our programs. We are adopting what we're calling the 4 C's of collaborative monitoring. And there's sort of 4 tiers, if you will. So complementary, classic, concentrated, and corrective action. With complementary meaning a very high-performing program of some years where we don't need to do as in-depth monitoring, all the way on that continuum to a corrective action where we're very engaged and on top of it on a more intensive basis. So programs will be assessed by JWB staff from all 3 areas, from financially, program, and evaluation to determine which programs can fall within this complementary bucket, which will mean less work for the agencies and less work for us. So the whole idea here is that we concentrate our efforts and their efforts in the right amounts and in the right places. So some of the criteria that'll be looked at to determine kind of which bucket a program might be in include past performance, capacity, service delivery, and population. So some programs might be might be performing pretty well, but it's just a very sensitive population that they work with, for instance. So we might do more monitoring in that case. So it's not all a matter of an agency performance, but sort of a risk-based approach. So we're excited to do that. In all regards, we're trying to spend our time in the right ways and with the right programs and not be more burdensome than we need to be to the programs that we fund. You've heard a lot already about our movement towards the fiscal year 25 budget. This whole board won't see anything until the May board meeting. The April Finance Committee will see at least the first passes at the budget and the multi-year forecast. This year, I will just say, is significantly more challenging this early in the year to be able to project and make some key decisions. We talked about lapse, post-pandemic, and then fiscal year 23, we're really looking at what that target ought to be. And we talked about, should we be budgeting 10% lapse? Should we be budgeting 15% lapse? We want to be realistic because to Mr. McCurrick's point earlier, to the degree we assume we're going to have lower lapse but have higher, we might have been able to put those dollars into the budget in current year programming. But if we continue to assume that lapse will be low, but in fact it's much higher, that money goes unspent within the community. So lapse percentage is one thing that, we're gonna, a few months down the road, we're gonna know more about what fiscal year 24 looks like. We will receive an update from the county in March, relative, am I right with that, Diana, with regard to property values. Typically, not only for, fiscal 24, well, 1/1/24 values that drive next November, so fiscal year 25's actual revenue to us, but also the outlying years. And usually that projection has been done earlier in the year, but there's just, this year, the first time we're going to see that is March. And that's, of course, a huge driver of all of our budget. And property values have been so volatile, we're pretty doggone sure that the last updates we had are not going to hold, that those will change, but we really don't know what they're going to be. Third would be we're watching local inflation as we determine what our COLAs ought to be, both for our staff as well as for agencies. And again, those numbers are moving every month. We get local CPI every 2 months, I think. So the last that we had was February, and we'll get an update in April. But again, we know that number's moving, and coming down, we just don't know by how much. So we're going to use that April figure to drive our COLAs. So anyway, those are big swings and big assumptions that we just don't know yet. I would tell you some of the early versions we have of our 5-year budget forecast shows that we are, as the board absolutely wanted us to do, drilling down, spending down our unrestricted balance. But with the most current, although surely flawed anyway, forecast we have, we show it going negative to the point that it would not be sustainable. In other words, it would show a negative fund balance, which of course we can't have a negative fund balance. It would mean slashing some things. So just as a reminder, the board 2 years ago, when we have reduced our millage twice over the last 2 years, did it 2 years ago, did it last year, and the discussion around this table was we want to reduce it now so that we can, because we have these substantial fund balances, but we can always raise it back up to the 8891 that it had been historically for a very long time. As a reminder, 1 mil is the maximum of what JWB can do. So we'll see how all of these factors play in. Obviously, we'd prefer not to raise millage back to, say, last year's rate. But I would say it's very likely that we would be looking at stepping millage back up, not all of it at one time, but step up to 8508 and then 8891, where we had been 4 years ago and for a long time before that. So that's, just kind of wanted to give you a preview of where we are and what we're thinking at this point. This will be Laura Brock's last board meeting. So I've tried to embarrass her before a little bit here at the board table, and we obviously wish her well. She has been an extraordinary leader here at JWB, extraordinarily competent in her fields of expertise, a great manager, and a great colleague and friend to many of us. She, I think, is just extraordinarily professional and always has been, and very transparent here with the board, and able to synthesize a whole lot of really complicated things into very digestible presentations for you all, and she is the same and helpful to all of us within the agency. So we will miss her. A reminder that on Friday, March 1st, just after the Finance Committee meeting, we will have a send-off in room 105 and probably spilling out into the hallways to bid a fond farewell to her after her 4 years of service. And that's all I have.
Well, after that, I just have to say to you, Miss Laura, it has been a privilege and an honor working with you. We're at the information items section. Does anyone have any questions, concerns about the information items? So we'll move on to the open agenda. Any public comments, Ms. Flynn? Okay, so Mr. Bartlett, we're at the milestones.
Rock and roll here. So let's see, we start off with Jennifer Dodd, 2 years. Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, 3 years. Linda Leedy, 9 years. Diana Caro, 12 years. And Yardis Garcia, 17 years. Congratulations.
Congratulations to all. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Second? All in favor? Thank you guys for a great board meeting.